So, Aline, it'd be amazing to get started with a little bit of your personal journey into the world of veganism. What's brought you here?
Well, I've only really been vegan for 4 years, which compared to other people, I come across seems like nothing. But it was really, I was on maternity leave, always thought about going vegan, but thought it was way too extreme and I could never quit cheese, the usual dairy argument. And I was literally just breastfeeding my daughter, and something came up on my phone about a cow chasing her calf that was taken from her. And that really, in that moment, that really clicked. And then a few months later, the documentary Dominion came out here in Australia, and I went to the premiere. And I don't know if you've seen it, but that's a really, I'm sure you probably have, but that's a really confronting one. So I watched it all in one go, and I always say I turned vegan overnight, which obviously doesn't really happen, but mentally, absolutely. Like from that moment, I was like, well, okay, no, that's it. Whatever it takes to go vegan and eliminate all of this, I'll have to do it. And and that was really the turning point. That was about 4 years ago. And my kids are being brought up vegan now. My business is vegan. Everything turned from there. It was a pretty simple switch because I'm in it for the animals, not for my health or for sustainability. That's great side effects. But for me, it's really the animals and that enormous cruelty that's out there still. That if I think about that, I don't miss anything that I would have missed before. I don't miss cheese. I don't miss dairy because it's horrible.
Yeah.
It was an obviously big change, a big lifestyle change, but an easy one in a way.
Yeah. No, I share a similar feeling to you actually on that. I think, people say, don't you miss this? Don't you miss that? I think, well, nothing is worth the pain and cruelty to me. It doesn't matter how good it is.
And once you have that in front of your, internal eyes, like I keep seeing that cow chasing her calf. I don't miss any of that dairy.
Good on you.
Yeah.
Good on you. Just from the part of Australia that you're in at the moment, what was it like culturally from a vegan standpoint? Was it difficult given the surroundings, or is it quite straightforward where you are?
I'm in Sydney, so big cities always help in terms of vegan food choices, and Australia in general has a very growing vegan movement. I mean, we're still a tiny minority, obviously, but it's growing, and most restaurants have a vegan option. It's not always just a salad. So I'm quite lucky where I am, and it's from the food side of things is relatively straightforward. I was asked by the World Vegan magazine to write a top spot Sydney with a few restaurants and possibly one or two fashion shops that sell vegan clothes. I was like, well, having had two kids over the last 2 years, I haven't been, out shopping that much for fashion, and with COVID and everything, there was no need. But I thought, well, there's not really any shops. And then I asked around, in the Vegan Sydney Facebook group, and I asked other people that I thought they must know. And everyone says, well, there is not one retail fashion shop that sells vegan things. I'm like, oh, that's actually, for veganism being becoming quite mainstream, that's actually amazing. So there is room to grow, but from the food side of you, it's relatively easy.
Yeah, and I share similar sort of sentiment around actually UK. Big cities tend to be easier, and food, you know, is where everything's centered, and it hasn't necessarily. I don't think there's enough voices in different avenues. I know when I came across your business, actually just instantly was like, oh my, yeah, obviously there's the leather sofas and things like that you think about, but I hadn't ever really thought about anything else in that space. Just tell me a little bit about your kind of journey into that. So were you into interior design beforehand and then had to kind of pivot?
Yes, that's exactly how it happened. So I've been an interior designer running my own business for the last 10 years. And at that point when I turned vegan, I was on maternity leave. So I wasn't working. I wasn't even working. I always had my own studio, but I also worked for companies over the past years. And at that point, I wasn't working at all. And I could really focus on this, you know, whole life change in terms of food and my wardrobe and cosmetics and everything, and how to become vegan while breastfeeding and, you know, making sure my daughter has everything she needs. So I really focused on all of that. And then I thought, well, can't really do my job as I used to do, because I never really specified leather that much anyway, but definitely wool carpets and wool fabrics and silk curtains and those kind of things quite a lot. And I thought, well, and from the material point of view, I thought, well, okay, there needs to be some change. And at the same time, I thought, well, actually, interior design is great, and I work mostly in commercial interior design, so a lot of office fit outs or restaurants or commercial spaces, and it's got its role and it's an important job, but it felt so trivial compared to all the cruelty and all the pain that's going on out there. So I just wanted to buy land and adopt 5 million farm animals, you know. So I went through all these different motions of that. And then I thought, well, okay, I just need to turn my business completely vegan. How do we do that? Does it end at leather couches and wool rugs and silk curtains, or is there more to it? And that's when I really started researching the whole subject. And I came across paint. I was like, oh, paint, but what's there in paint? And there's a lot of animal products in paint. And even if there isn't, then there's usually so many toxins in there or chemicals that are tested on animals. So it's still not vegan. And then I came across more and more, and I thought, well, it's too much information, and it's all over the internet, but it's not in one spot. And if I want to, you know, if I want to work in this field, I need to have the resources in one space. And that's how everything evolved relatively quickly. I decided to write a book to capture the most basic information I found, because, you know, then I found out towels aren't generally vegan, like most towels aren't. And that's because of the dyes, that's because of the chemicals used in there, that's because of beeswax, like a whole lot of things. But who thinks of that? Towels, you know? And I thought, well, I need to put it in one space. So I wrote a book. And that's how it really started. And then I thought, well, the book is great. And it actually, I think it's been launched exactly a year ago. Yeah, it was launched a year ago. So I've sold so many more than I expected, because I thought, well, it's more an exercise for myself to put all this knowledge in one package to tell clients about it. But then the book was selling really well everywhere in the world. I'm like, well, this is probably a thing. Maybe this is the next, you know, trend that needs to be looked more into. And I had a lot of vegans contacting me like, I've been vegan for 12 years, for 20 years. I never knew that, you know, plywood is not vegan. And that's when I decided to also create an online course, because I thought, well, we need to get all the interior designers on board. Even if they're not vegan, it doesn't matter. But if they can reconsider what they're specifying, or if they can cater for a more ethical clientele, that's a different specialty for them. And that's also, a bonus for the vegan movement. So, so it's all just developed quite naturally, but very fast in a way, because I don't know, when I started looking into this, there was no vegan paint in Australia. And now there's 2 companies openly advertising it, that their paint is also vegan. And there's so many articles and it's like in newspapers and magazines and in non-vegan spaces where I think, well, it is a thing and it's happening. So it is very encouraging. Because only over the last few years, it's actually become more and more noticed, I'd say.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my little bubble I live in too, but at least in my bubble, it pops up here and there all the time.
It's completely mind-blowing, to be honest, because I think, an eye-opening, because like you say, the food is often front and centre. People then kind of go down the clothes route, the toiletries, the bits and pieces within their home. But there's some things I think we just don't ask questions over because we just don't assume that there would be anything in it.
You wouldn't.
You think paint on a wall, well, why would that be affected? Or towels, like you say, why would that be affected? I heard you speaking in an interview, and you mentioned, I know this isn't strictly interior design, but it's in the home. You were talking about toilet paper, and that was another one that, I'll be honest, was an eye-opener to me. I had no idea that there was any issue with that. Well, just for folks who hadn't heard that, and I'd recommend they hear that interview too on YouTube, that it be good to understand what's the process there that's the problem.
What's not vegan? It's the binding agent. I think it's some sort of gelatin. So just like, normal gummy bears or jellies, it's the gelatin that binds the paper, and you don't need it. Obviously, there's a lot of toilet paper companies that don't use it, but the general traditional way of making it uses that kind of binding material.
Is there any in the time you've been doing this, have you seen any kind of like legislation? Is there any obligation on manufacturers of products like that, maybe like paint, so on and so forth, to display prominently their ingredients in a kind of way that but they're in the way that kind of food is? Because I can't ever recall turning around a pot of farro and ball and seeing what's in it.
No, there isn't, and that's the thing. Like with even if you buy anything for the home, there's no labeling, there's no ingredients list. It probably says, you buy a couch and it says Timberlex, foam base and feather-filled cushions or something. But that's about where it stops. And I think it's also because nobody asks about it. I mean, I didn't used to, and I didn't even think of doing so. And that's the thing. Once you start looking into these things, you find more and more and more. And then there's the furniture glues. And I always say, I mean, my couch is still filled with feathers because I bought this before becoming vegan, and it's an amazing couch. I do feel bad every time one little feather pulls out, like when you sit somewhere, and pokes you and you pull it out and you have this feather in your hand. I feel bad, but at the same time, the damage is already done. The couch has been paid. I've already, I've already done this. It's already there. So if I throw it out now, well, it doesn't do anyone good. I'll use it as long as I can. And the next time I buy a couch, it'll be vegan. And that's what I say to customers or to students as well. Like, it doesn't have to be from 0 to 100%, but if you know about it, then at least you can change it. And it's the same with furniture glues. Every time I specify, do I go into all the details and ask the suppliers about down to the glue? I sometimes don't have the time. Sometimes it's good enough that the filling is not made of feathers or down, and that the upholstery is not made of any wool, and that the big items, the big parts of a piece of furniture or something I specify is not, or is vegan. If you have the time and if you really care about it, you can. But for me, it's more, and that's why I wanted to write a book and write a course rather than keep working one-on-one, project by project. I just want to get the information out there, and then people can do whatever they want with it. You know, I had people commenting on interviews I've done before, and they're like, this is batshit crazy, this person, you know, like, who cares about glues? And it's like, well, you probably don't. And like I said, I don't always go to that extent myself. But if you know about it, then at least you can decide if you want to or not. Or if you know that paint is generally not vegan, then next time you paint your house, you might just look into it and find the alternative and decide that that's, you know, the better way. It just, I feel like it's important, for me especially, it's important for me to get the information out, and then people can do with it whatever they want. But because so many vegans especially have come back to me and said, oh, never thought about this, thanks for letting me know, I feel, well, it's actually I'm doing the job I want to do, or I think I'm doing, you know.
Yeah, I think it's invaluable information. I don't think it's crazy at all. I think, you know, it's just a completely untapped kind of area that people just aren't aware of. You know, I certainly wasn't, and I've been similar to yourself, 4 and a bit years vegan, doing a podcast like this for 2 years, and until I came across you and your work, I hadn't. I'd be honest with you, outside of the headlines of, you know, make sure I don't buy cushions with feathers in, don't buy silk, don't buy leather, it hadn't occurred to me that to even ask the question. So I think you're absolutely right to put the information out there, to ask the questions. I think will prompt a lot of people actually to pick that book up and say, actually, do I ask these questions? And I'm fully with you on the kind of preganism argument, if you like. Like, if I've owned something from before, I often think, you know, from an environmental damage point of view, from the point of, you know, just not being wasteful, so on and so forth, is it right to just get rid of something? And I think I'm with you. I personally don't think it is. I respect anybody's decision on what they want to do with their stuff, and, you know, if they sell it and give it to a good home and rebuy,
exactly.
then that's cool too.
If you can rehome it, that's perfect. I mean, I understand with a leather couch, you know, once you know you're sitting on a dead cow skin, or, I mean, you probably knew before, but once you realize, and you probably just don't want that piece in your home anymore. But as long as you can rehome it, then that's better than just throwing everything out and starting fresh. Which, of course, 100%. Some people want to do too, and I understand. But it's totally, there's so many facets.
Absolutely. What was the process of research like for the book? Because, I mean, was this like literally approaching every company? Can I get your ingredients list? Like, how far did you have to go to compile all this, like, myriad of information?
It was a bit of everything. I mean, there is a lady out in the US. I never know how to pronounce her name. I think it's Deborah DeMar. And she has a company called vegandesign.org, and she actually has an online course as well. And she talks mainly about the cruelty. Like, she shows videos and talks about why leather is cruel and why wool is cruel. And that's a really good start. What I wanted more was alternatives. Like, I'm like, okay, I know all this now, but what do I do now? What do I use instead? And for that, it was really contacting suppliers and companies, and it's a tricky one, because there is a lot of vegan alternatives, but they're not necessarily sustainable. So there's, your PU leather and all that. That's great. It's not vegan. It hasn't killed any animals, but at the same time, it's really bad for your health, and it's really bad for the environment still, which then circles back to it's also bad for the animals in general. So finding a vegan alternative that's also sustainable, we're still working on that as an industry. There's a lot of bio-based materials coming out, like leather made of mushrooms and mango peels and apple leather. Like there is all these amazing innovations coming out. They're not all necessarily suitable for interiors, though. Like for fashion, definitely, but for interiors, they need to have a different durability. They need to have a different thickness. They haven't necessarily all been out long enough. Like this is only really accelerating in the last few years. So they haven't been out long enough to have been tested over the years. Sometimes there's beautiful materials, but there's not enough supply, because it's still all these smaller companies starting and researching these products and bringing them into the market. So they haven't hit the mass market yet. So it is a lot of contacting suppliers and manufacturers and also innovators of these products. And then, just putting it all together. But it's still a growing industry. We're behind fashion, we're far behind food, but it's still happening.
Yeah. Forgive my complete naivety with this question.
No problem.
But my assumption, probably drawn more from the world of fashion and also thinking about car interiors as well, that there is, I guess, it's leather and animal products are synonymous with kind of luxury, and some of the sort of the other alternatives tend to be considered cheaper and not as good quality, and so on and so forth. When you're working with a client who wants a very specific look, how difficult is it to find products, whether it's sofas or big pieces or the smaller pieces that give a sense of the same kind of level of luxury, but without any harm being done to animals? Is that more difficult to find?
It used to be. It isn't really. No, it isn't, because there is amazing leather alternatives out there now that have the same feel, the same look, and the products are out there, and especially in that more luxurious level, you usually custom make products anyway. Right. And if you're already at that level, there's definitely the same, you can get the same kind of feel and product.
I see.
It's not that difficult. You might have to do a little bit of research, but you need to do research for every client individually anyway. So, no, the products are out there. And a colleague of mine in the US, Risha Walden, she's a vegan interior designer as well. And she said the new luxury is, the luxury is that you have the luxury of choice, And then there's another colleague of mine in Santa Barbara, also a vegan interior designer. She says we need to redefine luxury, because the products are all out there, but it's in people's minds, like it has to be real leather. It's actually, there's this mango leather coming out of the Netherlands, and it feels amazing. It actually smells amazing. And I just think, the fact that this is made out of mango waste, like peels and the pulp, I find that much more appealing than, well, obviously, than a dead skin.
Yeah.
But there is some really amazing products out there that are so innovative that they replace that luxury component. You know what I mean? Like, then you can say, oh, look at my couch. It feels like leather. It looks like leather. And it's made out of mangoes. I feel like, you can replace it with a different talkability point. But saying that, there is still clients out there that say, oh, but it needs to be the real deal. And I find you need to approach each client from a different point of view. Some people are more focused on their health. Some are more focused on the environment. Some are just focused on luxury and it needs to just look expensive. So you can find arguments for vegan products for all these different categories.
How about, you mentioned earlier, like commercial settings are often the place where you sort of find yourself and doing some of your projects. And I'm thinking, from their perspectives, I don't know, say it was a hotel chain who wants, they want an element of luxury, but they're also probably quite price conscious given the fact that they're trying to fit out X amount of hotels or that kind of thing. Is there more of a challenge in that kind of, like you said earlier about there not being necessarily the mass production of these kind of things? Is there then a choice to be made over, well, rather than you going down the fake leather route, because the best quality ones are quite expensive, have you thought about changing materials? Do you often find yourself in that kind of like convincing space?
Yeah, not even necessarily convincing, but I mean, from my point of view, I never start with leather anyway. Like if I specify and if the client doesn't specifically say they want leather, I don't even go for the alternative. I specify a beautiful fabric that nobody will argue about that's vegan anyway. It's just when the question is raised, oh, why don't we use vegan? Why don't we use leather? Or why don't we use this and that? Then I'll explain why I don't specify it and why they shouldn't use it. And in a commercial setting, I usually use the price point and also the durability. And yes, in a commercial project, I find myself often having to specify a less sustainable product.
Yeah.
But that's just, like I said, because there's not the amount of material or of alternatives is not out there yet. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of alternatives that are naturally vegan. You don't need to go for the fake leathers, like it's just like with food, you can eat vegan chicken nuggets or you just eat something completely non-meaty altogether and it's delicious too. So if you want to replace like for like, there is alternatives, but so many people design in a naturally vegan way anyway, without necessarily having to specify it.
Yeah. Have you noticed, maybe in the commercial space, but maybe also in the kind of the sort of general consumer space, have you noticed there being a shift in the sort of 4 years since you've been vegan in terms of people either seeking you out or being more conscious of these things themselves without you necessarily having to say, let's talk about the material specifically? They're wanting to go down that route, maybe for their own green credentials if they're a commercial space.
It's probably 50-50, especially in the commercial jobs. I mean, sustainability has been a buzzword in the interior design industry for over a decade, and it's such a vague term. I mean, it's the standard now, and everything has to be sustainable, and every company is obviously doing things sustainably. But then, you know, one of my favorite stories, like I contacted a supplier and asked if the products they were selling are vegan, and he says, "Oh, well, they're not vegan, but we're a very sustainable company. Please read our sustainability statement attached." And I read through it, and the most sustainable thing in there was that they're recycling their cardboard boxes. And
right.
that has nothing to do, like, yes, they're recycling the massive cardboard boxes the lounges get delivered in, but that's got nothing to do with what I asked about. So it's such a wide field. But yes, sustainability is really important, and everyone wants to get the green tick, and there's a lot of that going on. But I feel like it's often just to tick a box rather than real interest. I mean, definitely in the commercial projects. Residential ones, it is more, it's becoming a bit more of a trend, and people are more concerned, especially over the last year when people spend a lot of time at home and, you know, think about their environment a little bit more. But it's 50-50. Some people just come to me, they don't even know. I mean, because I still have my old company name, and then I have my new business running parallel. So some people don't even know, but they're happy to hear about it. And I haven't really had problems with any client yet, like trying to convince them, and then they buy the animal products anyway, because it's usually quite obvious once you say a few things, you know. And I'm not trying to alienate any of my clients, but if you spell it out how it is, you know, it's the skin of a dead animal, or like wool, why is it not actually that organic or that healthy or that cruelty free, they usually get it.
I can imagine. I was going to ask you about the last kind of like 18 months, 2 years, because my perception, again, maybe naively, but and maybe from my own experience, and I always put the caveat on this, everyone's situation's been completely different over the last kind of 18 months and 2 years. So it's not everyone's been in this kind of like, perhaps in the very fortunate, privileged space that I've been, where I've been, you know, working from home, and, you know, you perhaps saving a bit of money because you're not traveling and so on and so forth to work, you're not commuting. Has that been helpful to you? Have people been looking around thinking, do you know what, actually, let's work on this project in the home? Or has it actually been, you know, people are probably turning a little bit more kind of DIY and, you know, so on and so forth? Like, how's it been for you over the last kind of 18 months?
Well, for me personally, it's a bit of a different story. I know the industry here in Australia has actually been doing really well, because, yes, people had a look around, tried doing it themselves, worked out that they can't do it themselves, and then contacted our industry, like colleagues and everyone. I personally had a baby 8 months ago, so I was pregnant last year.
Right.
I was writing my book. I was writing my book fully pregnant, was developing those courses just to get everything out before the baby was born. And I haven't really taken on any projects for the last 8 months. Mind you, I'm working on a massive project right now, which is something else. It's Vegan Interior Design Week, which I can talk to you about in a minute. But I know the industry has actually here in Australia been pretty busy. Because people started looking around, and, you know, same for landscaping. People suddenly looked at their garden and like, oh, actually, we need to redo everything. So, in this part of the world, we've been pretty busy. As an industry.
Like you've been very busy.
I've been busy too, but more from home and more, you know, from my desk.
Yeah, I know that world. Very busy indeed, and I haven't even attempted to write a book or start a course. So my hat is off to you. That's incredible. It'd be good to hear about the design week as well. Just
Yeah.
if you can, yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be
of
great.
course. Because I was doing all this research last year or over the last years, also for my courses, I met a lot of people and I talked to a lot of suppliers. I talked to a lot of interior designers all over the world. And anyone in this industry really, not just designers. And I came across so many people that were splattered all over the world. And I thought I need to bring them all together because I thought, do you know this person? She's in the US as well. And I was like, oh, no, I never. I always thought I was the only vegan interior designer. I was like, well, you're definitely not. How about, do you know this supplier or that supplier? And I'm like, no, I didn't know. Can you send me the details? And, that happened so many times that I thought, well, there's so many vegan food events. There's Vegan Fashion Week. There needs to be Vegan Interior Design Week. And my plan was to have this as an in-person event, where you can touch things and feel things. But then it's not possible at this current state of the world. And also, it's actually for a first-time event, it's probably good that it's online, because this way I was able to pull in all these different speakers. I have 30 speakers from all over the world, from South Africa, from the US, from the UK, from Australia, from India. This way I could pull them all in. And the same for exhibitors. I found exhibitors from all places in the world, and they'll now have their virtual exhibitors booth, but it's still bringing together a big community of people. And the main goal was to create this little community of vegan interior designers and suppliers. But then I thought, well, it's nice if they all mingle, but people need to know about this too. So there's 30 talks over 5 days, and it's about a lot of different things. It is about vegan materials and finishes, like the basic interior design components. But there's also talks about how to communicate your vegan values with non-vegan clients from a vegan psychologist, or there's a vegan investor talking about how he sees trends that he's followed in vegan food over the past years, how he's seeing them in design and in materials now. And so it's not just for interior designers, it's not just for vegans, it's meant to be for everyone who lives or works or sleeps in a space. I keep saying that because people say, oh yeah, that vegan interior design sounds great, but I'm not the designy type. I was like, well, but you sleep in a bed, right? And you paint your walls. You need to know how to do this the best way to stay healthy and, to do it in a sustainable way. So there's something you can learn from this. So, it's going to be a week full of panel discussions and talks, but then also one-on-one networking sessions, which is one of the points that was really important for me to include. So there's networking sessions where people are just randomly matched and they can talk for 10 minutes. And I've done this in the past in a whole lot of different conferences and events. And I always love that networking. When you're matched with someone, you might not have anything in common. You might not, get a business deal out of it, but there's always something you learn from these interactions. And I love these networking and these speed networking things. And it's online. It's so easy. You talk to someone for 10 minutes and that's it. It's not really a big deal, but you can get so much out of it. That's all happening in November. It's not far away.
That's amazing. That is genuinely incredible. What a fantastic resource. And like you said, sort of design is either everyone's touching design all the time. They're either doing it themselves, like they're making choices in their own kind of homes and spaces and workspaces, which is all, designed to some extent. Or if they're not kind of making those choices, they're living with the choices that they've either paid somebody to make or that they've purchased from a store. I think it's just so. I love this idea of being part of that process, even if you don't feel like you are, and learning more and understanding.
When I rebranded my company, I thought about the name for so long. I was like, do I call it vegan interior design, or does that put people off? Do I care if I put people off, or is that what it is, and is that what I want to grow? So, yeah, and every now and then I think, I should have just called it healthy, non-toxic homes, or cruelty-free living, because living or homes, that talks to people much more, because they think, oh yeah, well, I live in a home, or I am living. Interior design, for a lot of people, is like, well, I wouldn't hire an interior designer, so that's not my world. But yeah, it is really about just healthy living and healthy homes. But if I would have done that doesn't have the same punch or the same values. So anyway, it is what it is, and I'm still happy with my choice. But yeah.
Have you found it limiting? I mean, I ask because I'm in like I said to you just before we started recording, I've just left the day job to start my own thing as well, and I had exactly the same debate, and I'm probably still having it actually about whether to call it after the name of the podcast, so Bloody Vegans Productions, or whether to come up with something completely different. And I kind of ummed and ahed about whether it was a good thing to have the word vegan in, or actually could I would I be more of a Trojan horse if I came in without mentioning it and kind of slowly sent people that way. Have you found any kind of detrimental effect to it, or generally speaking, have you felt the value driven, the purpose driven element of it is far outweighs any negatives?
I guess I'm still testing it in a way, but I'm sure I've driven people away that were just looking at it and thinking, well, I'm not vegan, so that's not for me. But that doesn't really matter, because the purpose of it is that, well, my reasoning was it might drive people away, but it might also bring people in that think, what, interior design is vegan now too? Like, what the hell is that all about? And I think I just wanted a company to be out there called Vegan Interior Design, and there wasn't. So it had to be me. And I feel like, because I'm also more on the educational side of things now and more focusing on that, that's fine, because people definitely, like, students sign up.
Yeah.
Students are mostly non-vegan rather than vegan, and they just want to learn about it, and they just find it interesting, and they might want to include it in their work or in their services or not. But I mean, most of them do afterwards. And I think for that educational side, it's definitely beneficial.
Yeah.
As an interior designer who just wants to design houses and offices, or just design day to day, it's probably more detrimental, because it cuts out a large piece of the market. Then again, another speaker at my conference, and he also took part in a panel discussion, is David from the Vegan Business Tribe.
Yeah.
And he said a year ago, he still told people, well, maybe you want to use an alternative to the word vegan, maybe use cruelty-free or something else, because the world might not be ready for it. And a year later now, he tells everyone, no, definitely use it, because it's become trendy. It's become a real seller, and people are interested in it. And especially non-vegans still buy vegan food or vegan products because they think it's cool.
Yes.
So, and yes, if you only cater for the vegan market, well, you're not really gonna make a living out of it in a lot of industries. But in my industry, I feel like as long as you explain why vegan interior design is beneficial, which is not only for the animals, but it's especially for people's health and for the environment. As long as you get that point across through your marketing and through, everything you put out there, it's still attracting a lot of people, even if it's just for the novelty of it, for now. Obviously, we hope that it's going to be the default option at some point, but we'll see. That happens.
What's novelty in exactly, and what's novelty in conversation one with somebody? I think by the time they've thought about it and it's, the cogs have turned, it might be a year, it might be 3 months. Who knows what the time frame is? But later, I think these seeds are sown. If I think back about my own journey, I often describe it as I watched Cowspiracy and the next day I was vegan. But actually, looking back, there was probably road signs along the way, conversations with different people, things that were sown a seed that I didn't even think about. So I think you're absolutely right. There might be a company out there thinking, I'll get in touch with Aline and, this will help kind of get our green credentials if we design our new office to be vegan. And that might be how they think initially. And then they might actually go down the road and think, do you know what, that is the right thing to do, from a our sort of vision and purpose of our business. So I'm with you. I
feel like what we're still struggling with in our industry is that, well, every project is price driven. If it's a residential one or a commercial one, it's price driven. It's availability. It's the easiness to get things, and as long as the price is comparable and it's available in the time frame you want, people don't have a problem with it, and they're really happy to do it. As soon as you have to pay extra or wait 2 weeks longer, like with everything, it'll get cut out, and you'll just have to find a different alternative. But I think we are getting there, and it's also, the longer I work in this space, the more alternatives I know, and the more savvy I am to find another vegan alternative that will work. But I guess it's a little bit of a question of time. Like much is happening, like cactus leather from Mexico. I don't know how long they've actually been doing this. It's relatively new, but it's everywhere now. Cactus leather. I don't know if you've seen it, but they've got a massive range of colors, but they've got this really distinctive green, typical cactus green leather, and I see it everywhere now. It's popping up everywhere, and that's actually good to use for furniture as well. And it's only been over the last year and a half I've really noticed them. And there's so many other examples like that one. And I feel like it's just, it's growing really fast. And a lot of people in the industry say, it's another 5 to 10 years until we catch up. But I don't think so. I think it's happening. And I think, the thing is, the more people ask for it, the more companies will have to actually look into it.
Definitely an element of supply and demand. I'd imagine just even folks who've picked up your book and asked the question of a paint supplier that they use, or anybody, I think even that question being asked is probably a trigger for a company to think, I didn't realize that people were interested in this kind of subject. So the more of us who pick up a copy of your book, attend a design week, learn this stuff, and then try and start applying some of those decisions to our own lives, I think
exactly. Even if you just take a few steps, you know, even if you just start with toilet paper. It's something you use every day, so it's worth using it. Or changing it.
Well, there's the quote, Aline. Even if you start with toilet paper, I love it. But it's been amazing chatting with you. I absolutely want to make sure though, before I let you go, that we cover off how folks can get a copy of the book, how folks can get involved with the design week, and where they can find out more about you, the courses, and so on. There's so much to share.
Sure. Well, book and courses and information, everything, it's all on my website, and it's veganinteriordesign.com. Pretty straightforward. And then Vegan Interior Design Week has its own website, and it's veganinteriordesignweek.com. And yeah, it's those two websites that have all the information, and I share a lot of facts and information on Instagram and Facebook as well. Like I have a daily post, and whether that's a quote or like I have themes. Like on Wednesday, it's what do I call it? The unpleasant facts we don't like to share, or facts we don't like. Facts we don't enjoy sharing. That's how I phrase it. And it's always one fact about wool or silk or, you know, something cruel.
Right.
But then it's framed with other posts like this amazing new vegan hotel in Santorini, and then pictures of that, and this amazing fabric out of apples. So I have put a lot of this information on my Instagram as well, just to keep it in people's feeds, to think about these little things.
Well, we'll get some links to all of those sites, to your Instagram, etc., as well on the show notes. So, Aline, thank you so much. Best of luck with the design week, and it's been amazing chatting with you. Thank you.
Thank you.